Welcome to 'Tis the Soundtrack, the podcast dedicated to digging deep and bringing you the merriest of music all year long. I'm your host, Kevin Williams, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's our 2-year anniversary. I know, I'm just as shocked as you. What started out as a little experiment 2 years and 24 very inconsistent episodes ago has grown into an incredibly fulfilling project, and the most fun I've had with a hobby since the years I spent dragging my wife around Oregon writing about craft beer and homebrewing, but that's a story for another episode. Much like that previous stint in amateur journalism, this podcast has given me the opportunity to meet and interact with some incredibly awesome Christmas aficionados. Not to be confused with Joe, the Christmas aficionado, whose show just celebrated its 4th anniversary. Congrats, Joe. I want to start off this anniversary episode by thanking the Christmas podcast community. First, there's Jerry D. of the Totally Rad Christmas Podcast. Jerry not only invited me into the Christmas podcast community, but continues to let me come onto his show and talk for way too long about 80s Christmas movie soundtracks and obscure cartoons that no one remembers. Jerry, without your kindness, this podcast would not exist. And the same goes for the rest of the Christmas podcast community. It's been the most welcoming, supportive group I've ever been part of. A few more quick shout-outs to all of the folks who have come on the show, or who have invited me on their shows, or I've just had the opportunity to bump into or interact with. That would include Ken Kessler of The Sounds of Christmas, Jeff Lofton of the Lost Christmas Podcast, Sweet Timmy B himself, Tim Babb of Can't Wait for Christmas, Alonzo Duralde of Have Yourself a Movie Little Christmas, Linoleum Knife, Maximum Film, Breakfast All Day, Deck the Hallmark, and the million other things that guy does, Scott of the Holly Jolly Xmasu Podcast, Robert at Behind the Bells, Charlie at Closer to Christmas, Alex at 12 Songs of Christmas, Ashley at the Christmas Chapters Podcast, Mike at Advent Calendar House, Todd at Christmas Clatter, and the entire 'Tis the Podcast crew, Anthony, Julia, and Tom, who all host the definitive holiday podcast that starts with 'Tis. And if you're thinking, man, that's a lot of Christmas podcasts, well, that's just scratching the surface. There's also Horror for the Holidays, the Christmas Morning Podcast, the TGI Podcast, Total Christmas Podcast, Christmas Cousins, Christmas Potting, Festive Foreign Film Fans, Seasons Eatings, Tinsel Tunes, Christmas Countdown, Christmas Every Day, Rose Such a Glatter, Christmas Creeps, Weird Christmas, Christmas Past, Holidays After Dark, Snow in Southtown, 12 Days Pod, Cozy Christmas, Merry Britsmas, and Mary's Merry Christmas. And those are just the shows that have released a new episode since the beginning of December and when I checked the website to write this list. Website, you ask? That would be christmaspodcasts.com, where Sean, who also hosts the Christmas Podcast, does an amazing job of keeping track of all the new episodes of all these incredible shows. I can't overstate how awesome this community is and how grateful I am to have been part of it for the last 2 years. So, now that we have that long introduction out of the way, what are we doing today for our anniversary episode? I thought this would be a catch-up episode. A lot has happened over the last year that hasn't made it into the podcast. So today, we're going to cover a few of those topics, a bit of a peek behind the digital curtain. And we're starting off with the Christmas closet. No, it's not a new segment, it's literally a closet. Last summer, my wife and I started renovating our home office, but we had to put that project on hold when we discovered the water damage in the downstairs bathroom, which I mentioned in the last episode. Now that that impromptu project has been completed, and the bathroom-shaped hole in the floor is once again a functioning bathroom, we're getting back to the office. And part of our plans for the office project include setting up a permanent podcasting space, under the stairs. It's actually way cooler and way less Harry Potterish than it sounds. Our office has this closet that runs the entire length of our staircase, including the landing at the top of the stairs. Plenty of room to install a desk and my recording equipment, but still small enough to not cost a fortune to soundproof. And to me, that's pretty exciting. For the last 2 years, my podcast has been, well, nomadic. The coffee table, the dining table, my mic stand hooked precariously through the steering wheel of my car at lunch. As you can imagine, it comes with some challenges. And in preparation for having a permanent recording space, I've started picking up some lighting and camera gear. In the not-too-distant future, in addition to hearing me, you may also start seeing me in some videos. So there you go. Coming soon, the Christmas closet. That's right, Jerry. In a couple of months, we'll be closet recording buddies. Except your closet will still have 1,000% more new-on-the-card Karate Kid action figures than mine. You lucky. The next thing I wanted to talk about is collecting music. As someone who has a podcast dedicated to music, it would be a reasonable assumption that I have a large album collection. And I do. Well, large-ish, but until last year, I hadn't added to that collection since the beginning of 2010, over 16 years ago. My wife took me out CD shopping for my birthday, and I came home with David Guetta's One Love and Swoon by the Silver Sun Pickups. And I'm someone who loves the whole experience of buying music, from flipping through albums in the store, making a decision, sometimes based on the art alone, that tactile feeling of popping a disc into the player and listening for the first time. But that time, it felt different. It felt like the rest of the world had moved on, and here I was performing some outdated, archaic ritual. I'll go over this in more detail in an upcoming History of the Christmas album episode, but the short version is, compact disc sales had gone from a peak of over 900 million units sold in 2000 to well under 300 million by 2010. People love to put the blame on Napster or the torrent services that followed for killing music sales. But the reality is, illegally downloading music made far less of a dent in CD sales than the two technologies that immediately followed it. The first being Apple's iTunes Store, and the ability to buy any song for 99 cents, and the second, and you probably guessed it, early streaming services, like Rhapsody and Pandora. These two things not only cratered physical music sales, but they completely changed how people listen to music. The album was replaced with the playlist. So instead of listening to a cohesive work of art, something you thought was worth owning, worth purchasing, at the very least worth pirating, you just slam the skip button until you land on something tolerable. Not something you love, something you tolerate. No investment, no intention. And maybe it's just me, being an old man yelling at clouds, but I hate it. I miss listening to albums, I miss the ritual, I miss the intention. Fast forward to the beginning of 2025, and my wife gave me a turntable for my birthday.
What are you doing in my tent?
Just listening to some records.
And it was, with complete sincerity, one of the best gifts I've ever received. It was also incredibly generous. My wife absolutely hates clutter, so giving me a present that also implicitly gave me the green light to start buying and collecting albums took an amazing amount of selflessness. Possibly foolishness. I suppose we'll find out. This wasn't my first turntable. There was a period in the early 2000s where I was an aspiring club DJ. Heavy emphasis on the aspiring part, but that's another story for another episode. Anyway, this wasn't my first turntable, but it was the perfect gift for me, for someone tired of the impermanence of streaming, the lack of tangibility in how we consume music. So I started my birthday in 2025, exactly where I ended my birthday in 2010, buying music. And what has Kevin been buying? Glad you asked. Well, everything. Some of the albums I've had on heavy rotation over the last year include Passover by the Black Angels, it's a modern, grimy take on psych rock from a group out of Texas, and the Black Pumas, both the self-titled release and their more recent Chronicles of a Diamond album.
All I wanna do is breeze, take me to the ceremony, see, out on the edge of tomorrow. Yeah.
Absolutely every Curtis Harding album, especially last fall's Departures and Arrivals, Adventures of Captain Kurt. This was by far my favorite album last year, and if you're not familiar with Curtis Harding or the album, check out the tracks There She Goes and Out in the Black. Fantastic stuff.
It's a hard lesson to learn alone, but you're a grown boy, so please atone. Yeah.
Ray LaMontagne's Ouroboros. This one's a departure from the rest of his work. It was produced by Jim James of My Morning Jacket, and you can definitely hear the influence, especially on tracks like The Changing Man. Leon, from Leon Bridges. Just a beautiful album full of beautiful songs like Laredo.
I know a girl with a diamond crown, grew up in a border town, took me to an empty dive.
Black Velvet, from the amazing Charles Bradley, and featuring the Menahan Street Band.
I feel a change coming over me.
And Arcadia, last year's album by Alison Krauss and Union Station.
Stand at the back door, scream. This is where I like to.
And those are just a few. I could go on and on. One thing I will say, Every time one of these albums has hit the needle, or the needle's hit it, I suppose, it hasn't been lifted until the entire album has finished playing, both sides, front and back. I also picked up a new-to-me Onkyo SA-CD player from the late 2000s, and have once again been adding to my CD, and now SA-CD collection. And something I've learned. Used CDs are cheap. Like ridiculously cheap. I'm not sure I ever purchased a used CD until last year, but I couldn't believe it. Last week, I picked up like-new copies of A Very She and Him Christmas, complete with the little red envelope and Christmas card inside, and the 1991 reissue of the Beach Boys Christmas album for 99 cents each. That's amazing. And there we go. We've finally mentioned something about Christmas music in this episode. It took us a while, but we got here. And in fact, most of my vinyl and CD collecting has been Christmas music. The first 9 Christmas albums I purchased were the 9 albums that contain the songs that make up the Disneyland Main Street USA holiday loop. Research material for a still upcoming episode. Those were the David Rose Christmas album, Christmas Favorites by the Holly Ridge Strings, Ed Sullivan Presents Music of Christmas, Lawrence Welk's Silent Night and 13 other best-loved Christmas songs, Season's Greetings by the Holiday Strings of Felix Slatkin, Raymond Lefever's Merry Christmas, the Capitol Records Sound of Christmas Volume 2 for the track Caroling Caroling by the Hollywood Pops Orchestra, the Hollywood Bowl Symphony Orchestra's Music of Christmas, and the Rita Ford Music Box Christmas. Most of my favorite Christmas albums come from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. Alonzo and I touched on it briefly on his Merry Mixtape episode. During this period, you had these great conductors and amazing symphony orchestras, and they were releasing Christmas albums with remarkable, meticulous production quality, lush, smooth, and incredibly polished. All of the albums I just mentioned fall into that category, with maybe the exception of the Rita Ford album, which is literally an album of antique music boxes playing Christmas songs. But we'll dive into that on the upcoming Main Street USA episode. One of the best things about collecting Christmas music, especially from this period, is that if you do enough digging, you'll find some extremely pristine records for not much more than they would have originally sold for over half a century ago. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it and how Christmas records were used. People would play them a couple of times during the holidays, then put them away for the rest of the year, which often meant packing them away with the ornaments and decorations. With 2 exceptions, every Christmas album I named, I paid between $3 and $10 for, and every one was in excellent condition. There are definitely outliers. Both Christmas Favorites by the Holly Ridge Strings and the David Rose Christmas album cost me north of $20, and both were a steal at that price. The Three Sons Ding Dong Dandy Christmas is another one that orbits in that $50 to $100 range, though they have a couple other Christmas albums that, while not quite as good, can be found under that $10 price point. And then there's what might be the most expensive Christmas vinyl, the Moonglows 1953 Chance Records single, Just a Lonely Christmas.
Just a lonely, lonely Christmas.
This 45 has Hey Santa Claus on the B-side, which appeared in the shopping mall scene at the beginning of Christmas Vacation.
Hey Santa Claus, hey Santa Claus, hey Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus.
The estimated market price, should one come up, is around $3,000. Hey everyone, Future Kevin here. I just wanted to get ahead of some possible comments to that last bit. If you Google most expensive Christmas album, you're probably going to see a red vinyl copy of 1957's Elvis's Christmas album, and the AI overview will probably tell you it's worth somewhere between $15,000 and $18,000. I didn't count this album because, well, it was never truly released. The story goes that an engineer at the RCA plant in New Jersey used some red vinyl that was normally reserved for classical albums to press himself a special one-off of the new Elvis's Christmas album. That engineer later sold his album, along with a signed affidavit of its history, to Reverend Stephen Bannis, a Southern Baptist minister, for $15,000. In 2013, Bannis attempted to resell the album on eBay, where he had it listed for $30,000. Back when the listing occurred, several experts weighed in on the real value and determined it to be more in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. I couldn't find if the album eventually sold, and if so, what price it sold for, or if it's changed hands again since then. The Moonglows 45, on the other hand, which incidentally was also pressed in red vinyl, could be purchased right from the record store. And that's the reason I picked it as the most expensive Christmas album you could realistically own. Alright, back to you, Past Kevin. Outliers aside, there's a lot of amazing, inexpensive Christmas music out there. I'll put links in the show notes to some of the Christmas music sellers that I've had a great experience with, including Bloustar, that's Bloustar on eBay, STL_vintage64 on eBay, and Invest in Vinyl, which you can find at investinvinylrecords.com. They have stores on both eBay and Discogs, and they produce the inner and outer sleeves I use on all my records. And of course, check your local record shops and thrift stores. From my non-scientific observations, record stores seem to put out their Christmas stock around the beginning of November, though it never hurts to ask if they have a box in the back, while thrift stores seem to get an influx of donations right after the first of the year. I picked up both Christmas with Conniff and Season's Greetings from Perry Como from one of my local record shops just before the holidays. And I've found several albums from the local thrift stores over the last couple of months. Everything from common records, like Johnny Mathis and Mario Lanza, to more obscure items, like It's Christmas by the Lexington Singers and Christmas in the Old World, a Phillips compilation of traditional songs from different European countries. I plan on making some videos talking about some of these albums once the closet is online. But I also want folks to be able to follow along with my Christmas music collecting, which brings me to my next topic. I have been neglecting the 'Tis the Soundtrack website. When I upload a new podcast episode, I typically take the script and edit it into a corresponding blog post. Like everything else, that takes time, and the website has been running a couple of posts behind the podcast for several months now. But, as of the day this episode goes live, everything is caught back up. And while I was updating the website, I also made a few tweaks and additions. Now, there is an albums category at the top of the website, where you will find all the Christmas albums in my collection. As time allows, or as it ties into a future episode or video, I'll be adding more information to the entries. Less like album reviews, and more like a personal Wikipedia. I was also going to touch on how we're making a similar move away from video streaming services, and reinvest in physical media, Blu-rays, DVDs, but it's a lot of the same points we've already covered, so here are the fast highlights. Netflix, gone. Amazon Prime, gone. Hulu and Disney Plus, not gone yet, but definitely on borrowed time. Popping in my copy of A Charlie Brown Christmas and not having to deal with an Apple TV subscription is so much easier. And that whole Peanuts holiday collection cost about the same as a single month of a single streaming service. And a pro tip to wrap up this segment on physical media, Barnes & Noble does an after Christmas sale, and it's a great way to add to your own holiday music or movie library. They carry a surprising amount of Christmas titles, both in-store and online, and all of it is 30 to 40% off after the holidays. I didn't pick up any albums this time around, but I did grab DVD copies of It's a Wonderful Life, White Christmas, and the 1970 Scrooge musical with Albert Finney, along with Blu-ray copies of Meet Me in St. Louis and Holiday Inn, all for less than $50.
I like life, life likes me, life and I fairly fully agree. Life is fine, life is good, especially mine, which is just as it should.
I was also going to talk about buying a copy of The Sandlot after I got tired of it repeatedly disappearing from Disney+. But it was really just a ham-fisted setup for the final topic tonight, my grandmother. This last bit is going to be a little heavy, so if you have young listeners and prefer to preview it first, this is where you'll want to stop for now. My grandmother lived with us my entire childhood, from the time I was born until I moved out after high school. She wasn't a particular fan of television or movies. She preferred to read. Books, magazines, newspapers, she was always reading.
Here we just sell small rectangular objects. They're called books. They require a little effort on your part and make no beep 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 beeps.
That said, there were a few things she would watch. The Thanksgiving parade, if it happened to be on a TV she could see from the kitchen, the Olympics, both summer and winter, and the World Series. And that was about it. Oh, and she loves Superman. She was really into that 90s Lois and Clark show when it came out, and she also liked The Sandlot. She said it reminded her of growing up in South Dakota and the neighborhood kids playing ball in an empty lot in town. She bought me and my brothers a VHS copy of the movie the day it came out. There was a release promo where you got a Sandlot baseball cap when you bought it. It was a white cap with blue stripes and had the movie logo across the front. I actually found one for sale on eBay for almost $200. I'll put a link to it in the show notes so you can get a visual. Anyway, my grandma kept the baseball cap. I think it was originally just to keep me and my brothers from fighting over it, but then she ended up wearing it for years. It was one of the hats she wore when she was working outside or working around the house. She often paired it with one of those I'm a Toys R Us kid sweatshirts that listeners of a certain age will remember. She would look for them when they went on clearance, and she'd accumulated quite a few different colors over the years. I remember being out shopping with her and someone saying something like, "Aren't you a little old for that shirt?" I'm probably going to butcher this, but her reply was something along the lines of, "You don't grow up, you choose when to stop being a kid, and I haven't chosen to yet." The exact words have gotten a little fuzzy with age, but the sentiment has stuck with me ever since then. My grandmother passed away last October. The evening she passed, I was talking with my mom and one of my brothers. My brother was teasing me about having a Christmas podcast. You know, the normal stuff you do to fill the awkward silences while you're grieving. He had asked me something like if I was already listening to Christmas music. And before I had a chance to respond, my mom turned and said, very matter-of-factly, "I've been listening to a lot of Christmas music," which caught me completely off guard. She followed it up by saying, "I've been playing it for Grandma. It's the only music she liked. The old stuff. You know, the crooners. Not that new stuff. That's what she liked. We've been listening to it for the last few weeks. It's been nice. I mean, why not?" What my mom said hit me hard. It was sweet. It was vulnerable. It was a nice, comforting thought during a hard time. It was also a perfect characterization of my grandmother. She was stubborn. She knew what she liked, and she didn't care at all what other people thought of it. Of course she wore a Sandlot baseball cap, and of course she paired it with a Toys R Us sweatshirt. Of course she listened to Christmas music in October, simply because there was no other music worth listening to. It almost makes too much sense. And over the last few months, I have been thinking about it. And, taking a page from Grandma, I'm attempting to do more things I enjoy, or at least try things that I think I'd enjoy, even if they seem silly or embarrassing. In other words, and probably much to my wife's chagrin, I'm getting weird in my mid-40s. Like weirder than having a podcast dedicated to Christmas music weird. Putting myself in front of the camera, like I mentioned at the top, is one thing I'm trying. Another is learning to play an instrument. I never took band in school, mainly because I was too embarrassed to perform in front of people. And that's largely been the same reason I haven't picked anything up as an adult either. I think that's why podcasting works so well. There's an anonymity to it, an ability to control the final product through hours and hours of editing, an ability to remove anything scary or embarrassing. So, in an attempt to overcome that fear, maybe be a little more like Grandma, I asked my wife for a banjo for Christmas. An Irish tenor banjo, to be precise. And being the absolutely wonderful person that she is, and once again putting me above her own sanity, she obliged. I am not good at it, but I'm trying. And I'm doing it out in the open, where my entire family can, well, enjoy isn't the right word, but they can definitely hear it. My goal is to be able to play a few Christmas songs in time for this holiday season.
No, you don't get it at all. I mean jingle bells. You know, Santa Claus and ho ho ho, and mistletoe and presents to pretty girls. That's it!
And that seems like a good place to end things tonight. Once again, thank you for all the support and encouragement over the last 2 years. And pre-apologies for the extremely poor attempt at banjo playing you're about to hear. Thank you for listening to 'Tis the Soundtrack. You can find all of our past episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We don't judge, but we'd sure appreciate a like or subscribe while you're there. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, all under the handle @TisTheSoundtrack. Our website is tisthesoundtrack.com, and you can get in touch with us via email at kevin@tisthesoundtrack.com. Our intro music is Krampus Workshop by that wizard of most everything audio, Kevin MacLeod. You can find him and his work at incompetech.com. All other music, songs, and snippets of audio used throughout this episode belong to their respective copyright holders and are used solely for the purpose of commentary. Links to all the music featured in this episode are available in the show notes or episode description for you folks on YouTube. Cheers, and miss you, Grandma.